Welcome to the Real Estate Niche Show, a show that focuses on top real estate professionals who specialize in different niches of real estate. My name is Ben Kogut. Join me as we dive deep into the professional and personal lives of the experts of the real estate industry. Welcome to the Real Estate Niche Show. I'm your host, Ben Kogut, and today I have a dear friend of mine, JP Newman, on the show. JP is the founder and CEO of Thrive FP LLC, formerly known as Principals Capital Funding. In 2019, JP, together with Adrian, who's also a mentor of mine, had early identified the growing demand for multifamily housing in Texas and began acquiring a portfolio of over 1,000 units with several strategic operating partners totaling over $750 million in assets. In addition, they created a division that provides commercial debt, Thrive Lending, which has become a preeminent real estate lending company in Central Texas, successfully funding over $400 million in loans. I have a feeling it's more than that by now, by the time this goes out.
Well, 14,000 apartment units at about 600 million. So we need to update our numbers.
Amazing. Thank you. And also what's really incredible and inspiring is that JP and Thrive FP, it stands for purpose, for profit. And Thrive FP stands by the principles of conscious capitalism, enabling all stakeholders in their company to thrive. Additionally, in 2019, JP and his company launched a nonprofit organization called Veritas Impact Partners to provide health, education, and financial services for the workforce housing residents living in apartments. Their mission is to create connected communities and to lighten the load of these cost-burdened residents. JP is a graduate of the University of California, LA, and is an avid mountain biker, because I know that because we've done it, skier and wake surfer. He and his wife, Janet, enjoy spending quality time with the two amazing teenage boys. JP, thank you for coming on the Real Estate Niche Show. Did I miss anything? How are you? Welcome.
Yeah, it was very thorough. Impressive, man. Impressive.
Thanks so much. Well, let's dive into it, JP. So being that this is the Real Estate Niche Show, tell us, how did you decide to get into your real estate niche?
Well, real estate was a second career. I joke and say, Ben, that I was like a late bloomer. So like everything kind of came a little bit slower for me. Some guys make it at 22. I was not that guy. I tried a lot of things in my first career. I actually worked for Sony Pictures. I was vice president of family entertainment for 5.5 years. Produced some really fun animation with the Muppets, all kinds of great stuff. And while it was a great job, great studio job, I realized I was never going to find financial freedom, but it was super fun. And so I jumped out of a very glamorous boutique career, working for a studio, to go back to move in to my old bedroom, my childhood bedroom, as my dad was a real estate guy who had retired and was nice enough to mentor me for a year or two to really literally leave my first career of entertainment and really kind of start all over again from my childhood bedroom, which was quite humbling, raising money, $25,000 at a time with newspaper ads, because my dad was already kind of retired. So like a lot of his investors were already kind of out of it. So like literally it was kind of a very humble beginning from a studio executive to working in your childhood bedroom in your early 30s.
Okay, wow, unbelievable. And so, being that I'm a capital raiser, what were the newspaper ads? How did that go? I know, that's
well, my dad. A lot of his investors had aged out. My dad was already, in his mid 70s, and so I realized if I was really going to produce a business, I had to find new clients. But at the time, it really wasn't an internet based. This was a while back. So really, it was still the Wall Street Journal. And so literally, it just started out with ads in the Wall Street Journal. Literally, it was like small deals, like equity raises of, 1 to 3 million on 60-unit apartment buildings. And a lot of them in Louisiana. We were doing, at that time, Ben, we were doing like 9 to 14 caps back yonder, which that seems unfathomable now. That's like Bitcoin at 1,000, right? Like, early days. And that's really how we built the business, one person at a time.
I'd love to hear, what was the first deal you did?
The first deal I did was in Shreveport, Louisiana. And it was a 13 cap, and it went really, really well. But these were small deals, so really well is like the investors made their, call it, I don't remember the exact return. I'm sure it was 20+% return. I made my first money, which was super exciting because I was fairly broke, having used all my savings from my movie studio career into investing in a business. So I was very, very excited. Just got my brokerage license, and I couldn't tell you the exact return, but and it took 2 years of really living off of fumes, which was why my savings to turn that building around full cycle. But it was a big victory towards my real estate career.
I've known you for a while, and I've been really inspired by how you've been able to scale your business. And I'm wondering what have been the lessons learned along the way that have been your success in being able to get to where you're at now?
I think that, being kind of, when you're a studio executive, you're kind of an executive producer. So like when we were doing Muppets in Space, which was a Jim Henson show, like I was not the guy doing all the work. I was the guy I was the conductor, right? Like an executive producer or CEO. And I think that early on from that lesson from Sony, I realized that in order to scale, I needed a great team. And I needed to be the conductor. I needed to be able to rainmake, but I did not want to be the guy doing everything. And while I've done every position, the goal was to quickly not do every position. So I really think that a lot of what's made Thrive. And now we've got over $2 billion of assets. I don't know. I think we're managing about 250 million right now, and I don't know what I was 15 years, so I don't know how much we've done. But the point is, we do that with the team now. We're 20 at this point, Ben. And like, don't know if we'll get much bigger, but they're really talented people. So I really think that your hiring and your bonusing is super important. And what we do here internally is, for upper management, if you've been with us for a while, you have a chance to also invest and get a carried interest in the deals. And I think that's kind of we have an incredible retention rate here of really talented employees. So I think you do have to stay competitive on the pay. But I think once people start getting carried interest, it's like they're investors too. So all of a sudden it's investors, your staff is your investors, and they're talking to other investors, and then they feel like they're on the same wavelength as opposed to just employees working for some, daily or weekly rate or monthly rate or something like that.
Yeah, and I think that ties into your company culture. Maybe share a little bit about what your culture is like and how you came to that.
So very traditionally, Ben, when I started out, my dad's company was called Principals Capital Funding, a very traditional, what you'd expect, and it was actually kind of interesting because when I left Sony, I had the big creative office and, hanging out with some movie stars and having some fun. And it was a little depressing at first to get into real estate because it seemed kind of boring, like real estate finance. I could fall asleep saying that, private equity. And so I think part of me yearned from the beginning to create a different kind of company that was more creative, that was more vitalized or kind of reimagined beyond just a traditional real estate company. So as soon as I started gathering kind of my early seeds of success, I rebranded the company to Thrive FP. We have a very non-traditional office. As you know, we've got a home in the woods on 8 acres where our staff is. And I think that kind of changing things up and not being just another traditional real estate kind of changed the whole culture, and was able to kind of, the word creative, I don't know if you know this, but the word creative is over our front door here at the office, which you probably wouldn't expect a word like creative to be above a private equity firm. But that really was, I think, part of my Sony and part of my creative days of producing animation. I think that's how they've come out here and made kind of our company maybe stand out a bit different. And so when you want to be different, part of being different is not just looking different or thinking different. I think part of it was, you can't say you're this, you can't say that, you're special or you're transparent. It's your words, it's your actions, not your words. And so I think that it started making me think about, well, how am I treating my employees? Am I really that great? If our industry revolves around, raising people's rents and and lowering expenses, I hear a lot of people in our industry early on talk about the quality of the experiences of they call them renters, or I've even heard the word pieces of traffic, but really commoditizing the end product, which is none of us, Ben, you don't get to have this podcast. I don't get to sit here in this pretty background. Title companies, investors don't get to make returns. unless you have a resident who's paying $800, $900, $1,000, or in your case, having a store, that store paying their rent. Otherwise, none of this exists. And I think that concept really hit me early because I think it's very easy to commoditize. Oh, it's just a renter, it's just a retailer, it's just a resident. And I think the more you make that person real and you really bring them into your value chain and you treat them just as important as your investor, you kind of balance things out, which is very much a lesson from John Mackey at Whole Foods, who was a creator of conscious capitalism. It just became apparent. It wasn't apparent day one. It became apparent over time as the companies evolved. And I actually think part of this thinking is you can't do it when you're in survival mode. It has to come when you've gotten beyond survival mode. You have investors lined up the way you do, and we've been very fortunate too, to be in your deals. Then you can start thinking about, how can I be more creative with my approach? How can we kind of come from a different angle towards this industry? So that's a little bit of my story.
I love it. Yeah, that your quote, it's your actions, not your words, really hit home for me, and just the way that you've been able to thrive, pun intended, and that you were able to pivot after you had some momentum behind you, and that one of those major pivots was rebranding, right? What was that thought process like?
I was at a TED Talk. I was at a TED Talk, and it just hit me in the middle. Someone was speaking about their quest on a mountain, and they used the word thrive in a non-business way, but it just kind of hit me like the light bulb went off. That in order for me to have a different kind of company, I couldn't have a traditional name, and I really needed to have a name. And at the time, Ben, by the way, too, and I'm going to tell you more. I'm actually launching a podcast on something like this. But
tell me,
at the time, So at the time, it's kind of like Thrive FP was more of a vision of where I wanted to go. It wasn't where I was. I still had a very traditional business. I was not nearly this innovative, but I call it a soul thing or a vision thing. But I had a vision of being, where Thrive really was that every stakeholder in the value chain would thrive. And then FP was kind of a joke on LPs. Instead of being a limited partner, we're going to be an FP, which is the for purpose, for profit. It was just kind of a joke on LPs because I thought it was funny. But there was very little evidence when I created Thrive FP. Like I was not there with a nonprofit that was doing social impact yet. This idea of residents or your bottom line renters, being equally as valued was more of a vision and a mission and a goal. And it's still, by the way, a work in progress, but I'm still trying to get better at this. Like every day I'm figuring this out and trying to lean in even more. So it's not like I've hit the hill. It's still a quest, but it's a fun quest.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit more. I know that you guys started Veritas. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So, as part of the quest of, how do we make sure that we create amazing communities? I always say that government means well, but does wrong. So you've heard, housing's gone up. It's become very unaffordable in a lot of cities. It's taking a lot of our wages. And so the government says, let's do rent control. Let's not have more dense zoning though. God forbid that we actually were to supply the market properly. So let's just do rent control. Let's do all these things that sound good, but have had a spectacular record of failing. I find if you focus on just affordability without the rest of the puzzle, you know what you create? Ghettos, particularly in multifamily. You create the wrong part of town. It's all poor people together in one circle. So then you're going to have crime. You're going to have bad role models, and you're not going to have anything that you want to create. I use the word, how do you create maximum value? Not the cheapest price, but how do you create the most value for an apartment community? So the way I kind of look at it from a private perspective, not a government perspective, is not about the cheapest rents. In fact, your rents can be market rents. But then the question is, what other values can you create for that resident that makes him a reason that he wants to stay, and maybe you lessen his financial burden. So, for instance, Veritas is a nonprofit that really focuses on supporting all workforce housing residents, so people in the $25,000 to $70,000 a year who are living in an apartment. And we're really focusing on supporting them through three initiatives, through programs: health, financial advancement, and education. That's what we focus on. And our goal simply is to literally across America in this industry, when you rent an apartment, programs come with your rent. It's not just a square box that you're going to get programs. So for instance, during COVID, we partnered with Teladoc, the largest telemedicine company in the United States, and we're the first ones, I think, to do this in the world, at least in the U.S., where we took what is typically telemedicine, which is an employee benefit program, and we brought it to apartments. And Teladoc scratched their head, but they were very patient with us. And now, in certain select apartments that we think were exposed because the tenants or the residents didn't have health insurance and possibly not even telemedicine, it's just free. If you live in our property, you and your family are covered with 24/7 telemedicine, which was super important. It's still super important now, but when you were afraid to go outside, or if you don't have insurance and you wind up in the ER and you don't know if COVID's dangerous or what, it was so much stress. And how are you going to telegraph to a resident, we value you? How do you tell a renter, Ben, maybe it's one of your tenants who's struggling in a thing. How do you signal to that person that while this is a business, we care about you? We value you because without you, I don't exist. Without you, investors don't make a return. And I think that was kind of the mindset that, and then the title companies and brokers, which is how we've been raising a lot of our money, stakeholders in the industry, other operators, they are so far removed from that renter who pays the rent. And they're just in that nice downtown tower, and very pleasant and very modern, but there's no connection. Now, that title company doesn't exist without somebody paying rent. Or Marcus and Untitled Chapter, all these other brokerage companies that provide great parties for us, Ben, don't exist. And so when you really start to connect, it's really simple that we all are not only dependent on these renters, but really beholden. I'd like to think we should be grateful to these people because they're actually our customers. A lot of people think investors are our customers, and certainly we want to be great fiduciaries to our investors. I know you're a big believer in it. I am too. But actually, the real end customer is actually the renter.
Nice. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the investors, because I'm a capital raiser, and you guys have raised I don't know how many millions of dollars in capital, you and Adrian and your team. I'd like to switch and sort of ask you about that. What has been the recipe for success for raising all that capital?
Obviously, having a successful track record. No matter what you say with words, the proof is in the pudding of returns. So I would say certainly having and Ben, we are so fortunate to be living in Austin, Texas. And you and I've known you now for, I think, Ben, for 15 years. You were a broker when I met you at Grubb & Ellis, which that's how long I've known you, Ben. And
15 plus years ago, for sure. Yeah.
So for us to get this incredible economic ride together, and then having the skills to know what to do with it. So call it a little luck, a little timing, and some skill set, and a lot of hard work, has really paid off. I really think transparency. I think a lot of people get caught up. And it's easy to have transparency when your deals are going good, but when you have that one deal that's maybe not doing so good or does get set back, instead of trying to over polish it or being over optimistic, I think people are a lot more comfortable with just knowing where things are at. And what I really found is that investors, they can handle bad news. Just tell them the truth and just don't polish it. Just like don't scare the crap out of somebody unnecessarily, and don't over polish it. Just like be straightforward, keep them informed. And it's been incredible because a couple of our deals that have not been the perfect deals, I feel like we've had amazing investors because they never were behind the eight ball. They always knew what was going on. I think it's super important. It really establishes that trust. So then they do go into your next deal, because we're all looking for, I always say that when I invest, I want to know, does someone have the skills, the knowledge, and can I trust them? Especially not even trust them in good times. In bad times, can I trust them? Like, will they know what to do? Will they be there for me? Will they sweat day and night to protect my investment? Because that's all I can ask. They can't guarantee me a return. And if they can, I'm going to run the other way. But if I know they'll work hard for me through thick and through thin, that's definitely half the battle.
Amen. So let's keep pivoting a little bit. Let's start looking forward a little bit. We're in November of 2021 right now, and we're in a really hot market. We're in Austin. I'd love to get your thoughts on what's next. What are the niches or the trends going forward that you could share about?
Sure. So, as our favorite economist would always tell us, then there's at least a 50% chance that what I'm going to tell you is right. And I think when you look at kind of where we're at, I'd like to think that we're We're not even, by the way, theoretically, we are no longer in a pandemic, we're in an endemic. So now that we're in an endemic time, you see people regathering again, going to restaurants, everything's full here in Austin, as you know, we're booming. I think in housing, in multifamily, I think that we're in a really interesting time. Obviously, supply and demand is still way out of whack. And so I do think this is bigger than, I do think that housing, whether it's single family housing, single family rentals, multifamily, I think, still has some trajectory. I don't think it's going to drop 40%. I certainly am concerned about affordability. But that really comes down to a density issue and a zoning issue. And, supply and demand will ultimately even itself out, but I still think that could be 2 to 3 years away. So in other words, I'm still projecting increased housing prices and increased rents. I think retail, like you're probably seeing, Ben, with a lot of what you do, a lot of service retail and a lot of office triple nets will continue to thrive. I don't think it's the end of retail or the end. I think it's the end of certain retail. But I think a lot of it will thrive. There's just certain things you're still not going to be doing online that you'll be doing. You still want to go out, and just like I don't think movie theaters are going away. I don't think I bought shoes online this week and they were all the wrong size, and I just would have tried those darn shoes on. I'm probably not going to be a great customer. I know there's lots of great customers. I'm probably not a great online customer for shoes. I got to try them on because it's so much time for me to have to return them. I don't like it. And there's a lot of other service industries that hair, nails, all the things about. So I think that's great. I think industrial. I mean, I think our GDP is almost back to pre-COVID. We're 8 million out of the workforce, yet our GDP is almost entirely back, which is exciting and troublesome at the same time, depending on where you are in the skill set. And I think that's the haves and the have-nots a little bit based on your college education and your skill set. But I think all that really points to a thriving economy. There is a lot of world capital, and the world capital still wants to be in America. As good or bad as we are, money wants to be here, and money wants to be in Texas. So I don't know what that means. I mean, these are supposed to be real estate cycles. And certainly feels like a long time, but I wouldn't bet against the U.S. right now. I wouldn't bet against Texas, and I wouldn't bet against the American economy. So I'd like to say that I'm feeling bullish, cautiously bullish. How about that?
Beautiful. That's a very acceptable answer. Anything else on that topic before we move on?
I think that the big topic for all of us is just, as investors and what have you, is I'll give you a quick aside story, Ben, because I think it's relevant for investors. Everyone's talking about, crowdfunding and NFTs. And Ben, you and I have had conversations. And I was listening to a radio show the other day. It was a guest. I was in the booth. And this person's really going heavily into real estate NFTs. And you and I have talked about real estate NFTs. And for those of you who don't know, NFTs are non-fungible tokens. And I think with a lot of these things, whether it's cryptocurrency or NFTs, it's super exciting. And I just wish more people would say, we're figuring it out. Because I see people already pitching their programs. There's a new person in Austin who's already buying lots of things, NFTs. I know, Ben, you met someone recently who's buying things in the mountain areas. And again, I'm not saying it's good or bad. I just think it's so early that I just think as an investor, I would only say beware over the next 2 years that these are works in progress. They're very exciting. I'm certainly excited, but I know you're excited with them. But I think sometimes we forget, like, a lot of this is untested. It's untested. How do they survive in a down market? What is the government going to do as far as regulations on this stuff? Is the SEC going to weigh in? Why is this so much better than just doing a REIT? Like, a lot of questions need to be answered. And I think it doesn't mean to not do things. It just means as an investor right now, really do your homework thoroughly and maybe be a little patient because it's exciting, but I think it's a little of the Wild West. So I would just say proceed with caution with the new kind of, including even crowdsourcing, which is exciting, but I would have a cautionary tale to just, we've all been doing this in good markets. And I just think once you've been crushed in the head a couple of times with a 2x4, it really shows like who floats and who sinks.
Got it. One foot on the gas pedal with the other foot on the brake. So moving forward cautiously.
Yeah.
Got it. Well, we're gonna. I love it. Thank you for sharing that. We're gonna pivot again. We're gonna talk a little bit more about JP Newman, and the question is, how does JP invest in himself?
So, I think that if you're ultimately lucky enough in life to create what we determine as call it wealth or financial abundance, really, I think you realize over time, if you're wise, is that financial abundance equates to having independence over your time. Now, a lot of people, they just want to get bigger. So let's say you wanted to make $1 million, and then you make $1 million. Well, then you have lots of friends who made 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 million. So now you want to make 2, 3, 4. I mean, you can't stop at any level. At any level you go to, there's someone richer than you. And I think that the trick is though, but if you keep double sizing your business and you're working, I was with a friend who's just working crazy hours, but he's a multi-millionaire. And I'm like, I don't really understand that thing. So I think that if you're lucky enough to have your health and your time, I think that then what makes, what you said, like, is really taking that time and using it wisely. So for me as a person, I really value my time. And when I say value it, I'm very, as I get older, who I spend time with, my friends, my community, my interests and my passions, like double down. I'll spend money on, I've got more coaches, Ben. You need a sleep coach. You need a fitness coach. You need a crypto coach. Like, I've got more coaches in my life on things that are important to me. And so whether it's friends, family. So I think that maybe, to your point, I think for me, maybe more than almost anyone I know, I really focus on trying to be wise with my time in a way that really fulfills me and matches my mission and my values.
I love it. Yep. I've known you a long time, and that definitely is in line with what I see in you. And shifting to the next question, which is, how does JP Newman invest in the community? And you've talked about Veritas. You can talk more about that, or maybe there's something else that you could share about.
So, but I'm going to give you I'm going to do a small tangent on your question, and then I'll answer the question. Today, I had a lesson from my wise rabbi. Had a lesson today, Rabbi.
Mendy?
I'm in town. Yes, Mendy. And he was talking about this was like, I had no idea this was part of all Judeo-religious texts, but he talks about that actually when you give money to charity, not only are you giving a blessing energy to the giver, but the giver is giving you an equally amount of blessing energy to you. So the receiver and the giver, it's actually it's complete at 100% in both directions. And I never knew this, but think about this, Ben. Let's say you give X percent, 3% or 10% or whatever you decide you give of your charitable. The way it's looked at from a religious perspective is all this hard work you've done in your life as an investor, all that hard work, it gets kind of all solidified. All those phone calls, Ben, that you made, all those early days and all those conferences you go to, it all gets solidified in something called money. So money is like it's the stored energy of all your hard work. And the way you bless it is by giving some of it away. But when you give some of it away, you bless all the money. And you're actually going backwards spiritually, and you're blessing all the hard work you did as an investor, all the right tricks you did, all the right conferences, or all those late phone calls, all those things you worried about, it all gets blessed. So it's kind of amazing that charitable gives so much to the giver and not just the receiver. I think for a lot of people, they look to it as being transactional. And I'm really seeing as I get older, how much it gives to the receiver. And I know that you're a great philanthropist, Ben. You've always have been, but a lot of people, and you started in your late 20s being a giver. And I don't know if it's your family or your background, but I think a lot of people think I'll give when I have X, when I get married, when I have enough money, when I have enough time. And you've never been that way, Ben. You've always been really impressive, and you've always stood out that way. And I think I've learned in my later years. And so for me, yes, it is my charity, Veritas Impact Partners. And again, our goal is to change the real estate apartment industry, that programs come with apartments. Our tagline is to revitalize America's working class. And really, what do we really want to do, Ben? We want to show people that we care about them. We see them. So if we say that these residents, these renters matter to us, then we need to see them. And how do we see them and recognize them? It's through these programs. And whether they know JP Newman or Thrive or not, if they can feel like, hey, somebody's giving us free telemedicine during the pandemic, I think somebody might be watching out for us. That's good enough for me. Of saying, you matter, we see you, you matter, thank you, we value you. And that's really my mission for the nonprofit. And that's really what fuels me at this point of wanting to become the largest nonprofit nationwide with this mission. And I give to other charities as well, but I really focus on this point 4 or 5 things that really matter to me. It seems like communities, creating great communities that people can identify with, seems to be, for whatever reason, thematically a lot of what personally interests me, both professionally and philanthropically.
Love it, JP. And thank you for the kind words. I mean, it really warms my heart. But anyways, next, the last question, if you will, is how does JP Newman define success?
Ben, you and I joke. Ben and I have a mutual, very close friend. And one day, our friend gave us a shirt, and on the shirt it said the word mensch. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
So mensch is a Yiddish word, which means gentleman. Would you say? How would you describe it, Ben?
A person of high integrity.
A person of high integrity. And I think that ultimately, if I was to say, what do I want for my legacy? I want to be known as a person who's a role model to my children, my family, my friends, my community, to be that role model, but to be an authentic role model, which doesn't mean to be perfect. I'm a human being. I make many mistakes. Just ask my wife. But to be authentic, to be really authentic with what works, what doesn't work, to be human, but to still be a role model at the same time. I think that a lot of times when we fall into crisis, whether it's a political crisis or depression being an all-time high, or we get hit with viruses, the more people who can lead by example is really what the world really needs. And I just feel like I can't think of a higher honor or maybe purpose on this planet than I really see you as the same way. So I just think that, and it's everyone's privilege to be that, but I think to actually accept that is part of who you are, but it's a responsibility. But I think for people to accept that and fall into that and try to be the best they can be without being perfect is, I don't know, I think that's a pretty cool deal.
No, I love it. Well, that's I mean, we could talk for hours, I know, but we're gonna wind this down here. JP, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. Maybe share a little bit about if anybody wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, so probably by email, jp@thrivefp, thrivefp.com. Cody has my schedule. And I also have a website, thrivefp.com, which tells you more about what I do. It also has links to the philanthropic side if they're interested in the philanthropic side, which is Veritas Impact Partner. And then the only other thing I would say, Ben, is you've inspired me, and I'm going to start a podcast called Investing on Purpose. But really, it's not so much a real estate show. It's really more of a show exploring how the political, technological, economic, and financial, all these different trends, how they're going to affect businesses, capitalism. And I think I'm actually really optimistic and excited that these are going to be forces for good. I think social impact is going to grow. I have a faith with all the challenges that we have. I tend to be optimistic that somehow private enterprise will probably solve most of them because governments can help with that. I don't think you can rely on governments to solve our problems at this point. It's entrepreneurs.
Amen. All right. So we'll look forward to checking out your new podcast. And if you, we'll put that in the show notes below. Is there anything else that you want us to add to the show notes below? Let us know right now.
Yeah, no, I think we covered it all.
Okay. Well, then that's it. We'll wrap up this episode of the Real Estate Niche Show. JP, thanks again for being here. And to everyone listening, please, if you like this, please share it. Please subscribe, hit the like button, all that good stuff. Looking forward to having many more incredible guests like JP. And on that note, we'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks so much.
Bye, Ben.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Real Estate Niche Show. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me or the show, you can follow me on Instagram @BenKogut and @The Real Estate Niche Show. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.